want to tell you some things about me that you probably won't know. 15 years ago, I was suffering from chronic fatigue. It was debilitating, and it was probably my first real wake-up call once I started to understand that I had choice in my life. But I just couldn't be bothered getting out of bed. It was like my life was a mess and my body was falling apart, and it was a terrible time. Then 10 years ago, after becoming a personal trainer, because I wanted to basically help other women like me who had health problems, and I was always very good at sport, so it seemed like a kind of a logical place to go to get my health back. I went on this incredible adventure, and I I rode my bike the length of New Zealand, from the bottom of the South Island to the top of the North Island of New Zealand. And I rode 2,417 kilometers, or 1,500 miles, and I just had the most exhilarating time. And then 5 years ago, my marriage ended, and I found myself unexpectedly on my own for the first time in my life at 61, and I freaked out. It's like this was never meant to happen. But then I realized it was actually a golden opportunity, and I was getting a chance at life that didn't mean that I had to rely on somebody else to come with me. And at that point, all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, thank God I'm only 61. So I went from like freaking out because I felt so old to be on my own, to being so relieved because all of a sudden now I felt young. It was a young 61 that made that decision. And so, yeah, it was like an amazing time in my life. And you know what? It turns out that I realized I'm adventure woman. It's like, I'm not Wonder Woman, I'm adventure woman. And that's kind of what the rest of my life is going to be about. During that time, I realized that there is a major problem on the planet, especially with women from my era, where we were brought up to think we were less than boys and seen and not heard. I think it was pretty similar across the board, but we had the disadvantage of being less than. And kind of what happened is that we were geared, or we were trained to be housewives and mothers, and a lot of us gave up on our own dreams and passions and hopes to become a housewife and mother, which is exactly what I did. And
oh, you've gone mute. You need to unmute yourself again.
Sorry. And I just ended up lost and directionless, and so do lots of other women. And that's why I made, actually another thing I found out is that 34% of Australian women over the age of 60 live below the poverty line. That just shocked me. And so I kind of made a decision at that point in my life that I was going to do something about it, and that I was going to help other women my age reinvent themselves so that they didn't waste the rest of their life just in misery and just putting up with what they'd always put up with, that they were going to do something about it. So there came that day in my bathroom, and that was like the beginning of my reinvention. And it's like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I'm looking at myself and thinking, I cannot go on like this. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be the best I can be. But later on, I thought, what took me so long? Why is it so hard to change what it is? You know, like I'd had quite a few wake-up calls, but like, why do we not wake up when they come and hit us? And I realized that in my childhood, like I was born in 1955 in Auckland, and there was a lot going on in my family when I was born. There were a lot of like real serious dramas that mum was having to deal with. And so I was left on my own in my cot as a 4-month-old baby, kind of every day for 5 days for 3 months. And didn't matter how much I cried, nobody came. Whether I needed a bottle, my nappy changed, or just a cuddle, nobody came. And my 9-year-old sister, who was the oldest in my family, when I was like 4 or 5 months old, when she came home from school, it was her job to decide what to do and how to sort me out. And I realized as a result of that, that one of my biggest needs was safety. I needed to feel safe. And I think that that kind of pervaded the rest of my life. So getting, leaving home, I did not know how to leave home. I just did not know how to do it, but I did know we were allowed to get married young. So that's why at age 20, I got married to somebody I knew I didn't love. I knew the night before I got married. This is a big mistake, but I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't tell my mother I'd made a mistake. My father had died by this point. So I got married at 20, and my husband and I, we were both trained to be school teachers. We took off away from Auckland to start our new life. And then, so I taught for 5 years and had 3 children. So now I'm in a dilemma, because you can't just like walk out on a marriage when you've got children. So I met somebody once who just said to me, just start planning to leave, because I knew I was going to leave. I just didn't know how to do it when I've got, 3 young kids. So I did. Eventually I left. My kids were 3, 6, and 9 when I left. And so I spent the next 14 months with them, sharing them with their father, in a terrible state. You have no idea how much marijuana I smoked to try and cope. It was a very difficult time. And then my sister came to my rescue, and she paid for me to go and do a Robert Kiyosaki course down in Auckland. And that started introducing me to some people that I'd never kind of come across before, people who were awake and were doing things to make a difference in their lives and the lives of other people. And while I was down in Auckland, an American Hopi Indian called Robert Morningsky paid a visit to share his story. And he invited anyone crazy enough to go to Arizona on a vision quest. And I just thought, man, I've got to go. So off I went in search of myself, but I was still in that old mindset of just wanting to be looked after, And I met an Australian man who professed that he had, he kind of felt me and knew me and wanted to be with me. And before I knew it, I left my 4-year-old and 7-year-old, 4-year-old and 4 and 7-year-old sons in Auckland, New Zealand with their father, and I headed off to Australia with my daughter. She was 10, to be with this new man and just repeat what I had done for the previous 37 years of my life, which was fit in, do whatever it took to belong, feel safe, give up on myself, give up on my dreams and my hopes, to just live this mediocre kind of life. And I would have these little peaks where I did something that made me feel like my life was worthwhile, but in actual fact, it was just slowly going down the tubes. And then that day in October, and I was just like, my husband and I were in separate bedrooms by this stage. The talking was just kept to a minimum. We actually worked together because we had a chiropractic clinic. And the sex was long gone, of course. That was causing him problems, not me. It was a very sad kind of a time. And so I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and it's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, are you going to carry on like this for the rest of your life? You're 60, for goodness sake. And it was like a moment of truth. Just, I think I had this funny thought that when we have these wake up calls, I think it's your higher self and your DNA are going like, come on, it's like, what are we going to do? You've got to do something, wake up, So I think when I hit 60 and you realize that time actually is running out, you can't just go on putting things off for another 10 years, because of, like, I've got friends who are 70 and they said, wow, when it gets to 70, then it really hurts. And I was like, am I going to do that? And so something just changed. All the bullshit basically just left. And I went and found Chris and I said, look, this is what's just happened. And he agreed that he wasn't happy either. And I said, look, if you want to ask me to marry you and we start again and we do this properly, then the answer will be yes, but don't ask me if it's not what you want. I was really ready at that point to go on my own. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was ready. Anyway, so over the next 6 weeks, we renewed our vows. We sold our house. We made some incredible plans, really fun, exciting plans. We decided to go on a big trip up to Europe and to the Northern Hemisphere, like as a honeymoon kind of a thing for 4 months. Like, that's a huge long trip. And my father's from England and his is from Italy, and neither of us had ever traveled. We'd never really done anything. When you're a chiropractor, you work a lot and you don't even really go on holiday. So I was so excited. And then a month after we renewed our vows, he just, oh, I don't need to tell that part. It was all over. So this whiteboard of plans that I had in my head just got completely wiped clean, and my whole future, every single aspect of my future just disappeared. And I went into this kind of nosedive, and I was just totally shocked. For about 3 months basically, and I was trying to figure out what the hell had happened, and it's like, why did this happen, and how was I going to cope, and all sorts of things. And then again, it was just this one day when this part of me that had stood in front of that mirror and said, you're not going to put up with this anymore, you've got courage, you've got guts, you've got resilience, you know what to do, you know how to look after yourself. Even if I didn't believe I could, deep inside I knew I could. And this little voice said, it's like, oh, for God's sake, stop crying. You know, it's like, you're free at last, go do what you want. And it was like, yes, but I'll be on my own. It's like, I don't know how to look after myself. It's like, oh, come on, that's just rubbish. Look how much fun you had, and look what you did to do that big ride, that 2 months of riding your push bike. It's like, oh yes, but what if something goes wrong and I don't know how to cope? And it's like, oh, well, for God's sake, you've got your marriage settlement money, you want to go on an adventure, you love excitement, just go do it. And in that moment, once again, I couldn't deny that all of a sudden here was my second chance, and I could go and do what I wanted. So I went on that honeymoon all by myself. It was an incredible, incredible time. I went and saw my daughter in Canada. I spent time with my son in England. I just had the most wonderful adventures. I went to Robert Redford's ranch in Utah, and he's got these huge mountains where they do skiing in winter, but in summer they do zip lining. So I'm going down these thousands of feet up in the air, down these 6 zip lines, 65 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that is in miles. Just like honing down, just screaming. There were two lines, and racing the person next to me. And that was the beginning of my trip, and I was just exhilarated. And I went on a cruise. I'd never been on a cruise before, on an Abraham Hicks cruise. I just met amazing people. I just saw so much stuff that I'd never seen before. When you live down in Australia and New Zealand, it's like we're in the country. But when you go up to the Northern Hemisphere, it's like Pandora's box just got opened. And I just had the most incredible time. But I also had to deal with some real intense dramas. I had my phone stolen. I had my credit card hacked. I had planes to catch, buses, trains. So I got to see for real how resilient I was. Now, there were times when I just broke down on the streets of Paris, bawling my eyes out because someone had stolen my phone. And in my phone was the hostel where I lived. I didn't know how to get back up to Montmartre. Didn't know where my hostel was, and these people just came to help. And when I got back to the hostel, they all helped, and like, help is always there, but if you don't ever step outside your comfort zone, all you're surrounded by is this boringness of something that you know so well, you know how to control it, you know how to manage it, and your life just slowly goes down the tubes. So I was only supposed to be there for 4 months, but I had such a good time, I added another month to it. And I won't go into all the things I did, but you can imagine I was like a kid in a lolly shop. But then the day came and I had to come back to Australia. Oh my God, that was so hard. I had no husband, I had no home, I had no job, and I had no car. And the contrast between my time in Europe and back home was like, oh my God, I went down the tubes and just crashed. But one day I was lying down having a bit of a misery rest, and it was like I was in a dream, but it was real. And I just thought, and it wasn't even a what if this is the last day of my life. It actually felt like it was the last day of my life. And then I looked back on what my life consisted of, and I was just shocked. It was the regret that just flooded my body was real. It was like, another wake-up call. It was like, okay, what are we going to do to keep her awake? And so I just got straight out of bed. It was so ugly, it was so horrible. I got out of bed and I just Googled the word regret, And I came across an article by an Australian palliative care nurse called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I had 4 of those top 5 regrets. And that really shocked me. I thought, oh my God, I'm already pretty much on my deathbed and I've done bugger all with my life. So then I just started searching. It's like, well, what on earth am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I realized first I needed a car. So I got that one handled. I just made sure it was big enough that I could sleep in the back because I didn't have a home. I couldn't afford, well, I didn't want to live anywhere. You know, I wanted to keep traveling or doing something. So I bought a little Subaru Impreza hatch that I could sleep in the back of. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? How am I going to earn money? My marriage settlement money will run out soon. And then I just thought back on some things that I'd done in my life. And I was a very good teacher. Even though my kids were only 5 years old that I was teaching, I just really enjoyed it. And I found I was very good at getting a point across. And I'd also presented some personal growth seminars in my 40s for a company. And I was pretty good at that too. And so I thought, what if I helped women my age who are lost and directionless, just like I was? It's like, I know what that feels like, and I know what it feels like to get out of that. And for me, that thing is adventure and excitement, you know, like Adventure Woman. And that just brings me alive. And so I signed up for some courses down in Sydney, packed my car up, put my bed in the back, and off I went and spent the next year basically training to be a coach and a speaker, and learn a bit of business. I've still had to deal with a lot of my own stuff in order to make this happen. And besides friends like Gertrude kick you in the butt. And in between the courses, I would just take off and go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, because I wanted. And if I all of a sudden wanted to stop and have a sleep, I'd pull over and hop in the back. It didn't matter if it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was like I'd been driving, I'd jump in the back, and then I'd wake up and I was so excited. It's like I felt so free. It was just incredible. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I didn't go diving back into my cave, you know, in the safety of my cave, because there was some like freaky stuff going on in my head. I realized how much my mindset was negative. My mother was so negative. My sister was negative. Everything about my childhood was about who I wasn't. Be in your place, do what you're told, fit in. You don't deserve to have the life you want. Once I asked for something that, and my mother told me I was mercenary, so I had to go look up what does mercenary mean. It's like, oh my God, you know, like, how did I even survive all of that? And, you know, basically I was still quite a happy person, but boy, these mindset dives were just destructive. So I had friends that I could ring and help clear some of that stuff out. But it's been a pretty massive journey. And that's one of the things that I realized, that when I start teaching and running these courses that I'm going to do, mindset has got to be the first thing, because it doesn't matter how wonderful everything feels. If that little thought comes into your head and takes hold again, bam, down you go that road. And probably the thing that I said about myself the most was that I'm just such a loser. And, you know, I won the New Zealand under-18 badminton champs. So it's like I had a little bit of credibility that I wasn't such a loser. But in life, I just felt like a loser because I couldn't make anything happen and sustain it and stay happy for very long. So that's kind of like enough of my story, really. And I just am going to dedicate the rest of my life to helping women find what it is that they love to do, and go do it. Go play with people who also love that, because it starts to fill you up with like happy hormones. And those happy hormones are way, way stronger than the negative ones once you ride the crest of that wave. But the thing that I found is if I don't keep up on that crest of the wave, then that's when I start to dive down. And when I met Jeff on that beautiful evening where I had the universe conspired to change my plans that night, because it was footy finals. And I was going to go to the usual pub that I went to, but there were just too many drunk people there in the afternoon. I'd watched one game in the afternoon, and it was like, I don't want to come back here tonight. It's just going to be worse. And so it was like, well, where am I going to go? And then I remembered the North Burleigh Surf Club. And so I kind of got dressed up a little bit, because you don't have that many clothes in your car. And off I went up to the North Burleigh Surf Club, feeling so good about myself. Everything that I was doing was filling me up with who I truly am. And it was such a good feeling. So I must have kind of gone into that room like a bit of a beacon, I think, because it had happened lots of times where guys would just come up and talk to me, usually always young guys. And it wasn't anything like sexual or anything. They just seemed to find that I was someone they wanted to talk to. I even had one guy down in Wollongong just bawling his eyes out, and I'm holding his head, his face in my hands, and he's just crying and looking at me saying, please go and find more women like you. Oh man, that hit me. And that kind of started me off on that journey too. It's like, how do we as women treat men? And I have all these women friends who just don't ever want to be bothered with men again because it's all the men's fault. And it's like, this is not true. So when I met Jeff that night, when I walked in and we just got talking about the game, not about anything else because we're busy. And then he asked me out for coffee and it's like, no, I can't. I can't. I'm off to do my TED talk in Toulouse in 5 days. I don't need this distraction. And then I thought, oh, damn it, say yes. You know, like that had become the mantra for my life, say yes. Thank goodness I said yes, my darling. But I've had to pull my head in, you know, and learn, what have men been going through? What have their lives been like? How do I work with this beautiful man who just adores me? He tells me every day, I don't know how many times, how beautiful I am, how sexy I am. No one has ever in my whole life told me how sexy I am, and I'm sexy at 65. How good is that? Oh, seriously. So it's like, I've got work to do as well. But it's beautiful work, you know, like some days it's not beautiful, but by the time we go off to our corners and then come back, it's like, there it is again, you know, the love that that drew us together in the first place. So I got a mission ahead of me, and it's going to be all about fun and adventure and excitement. And you know, Gertrude, the first thing I'm going to do, I've actually cut my foot really badly, so I'm out of action, but I want to get together women who were once good at sport, because I was good at every sport I ever tried to play. And I just thought, how many other women are out there like me who have got fat and lazy, bored, and we're just going to get balls and hockey sticks and basketballs and who knows what and bring them together and start having fun. So that's me for the rest of my life. Watch this space. Thank you for listening. It's been wonderful to be here.